Apometry with J.S.Godinho. And let's remember what apometry is. A set of magnetic techniques to assist people, assist human being on a therapeutic treatment. That's apometry. And who first created it was Dr. Lacerda, a medical doctor, since 1965. Before he knew anything about him, he was already on the field of spiritual issue. He was with a group of studies, same thing that Dr. Lacerda did, and he did not know him. One did not know the other. He was with his group of studies since a long time, since very early in his life, J.S.Godinho, and he was working on past life therapy on his private clinic that he opened on his own before he met him. And he was working, assisting people all for free on a spirit group as a medium. So he had both of them had almost the same thing. One in one state, very close to the other state, actually connected. One from Rio Grande do Sul, the other one from Santa Catarina, one on the side of the other, but they did not know each other. When they met each other, when Godinho knew about him and his book, and he studied everything with his group and met him, then it was something else. When it happened, he created his group under the name of Spirit Group Ramatiz of Lages, Santa Catarina, the state of Santa Catarina in Brazil. And he created this group to work with apometry from Dr. Lacerda. So for a long time, they practiced and studied all about Dr. Lacerda, and Dr. Lacerda was together with him, and for a couple of times they worked together. Dr. Lacerda went to his group to teach them how to do. So after that, Anna, after many years of intensive investigative research on the fields of philosophy, psychology, and the many branches of psychology, like transpersonal psychology, spiritual psychology, and all the other branches of psychology, psychiatry, what else? Spiritism, all this kind of studies. After many years doing that, and with practice, intense practice, he developed and created, together with his group, the technique of multiple unfoldment. It was implemented to apometry. It gave apometry a new perspective, because with that he established the 3 laws of multiple personality. Actually, multiple unfoldment is a technique that deals on a great deal with animism, animistic matter. What animistic means? Personality, multiple personality. If you are incarnate, anything that comes from your unconscious are related to multiple personality means animism. When you are discarnate, it means spirit, spiritual issue, and animistic issue. So he said multiple unfoldment is great. It's wonderful, perfect for animism, for people with the matters, with their multiple personalities. He created that. It was implemented to Apometry with the approval of Dr. Lacerda. And he presented this subject on the 3rd Brazilian Congress of Apometry in Brazil. And it was with a great success. When Dr. Lacerda went to the other side, he also approved his work, and he continues studying in there because he has communicated in order to come back and continue with the research and everything that he's committed to. Now, according to J.S.Godinho, that I myself call the father of multiple unfoldment, as I call Dr. Lacerda as the father of Apometry. So according to Godinho, Apometry and multiple unfoldment, because with multiple unfoldment, you unblock a group of personality who are dissociated to your block of conscience and harming you most of the time. So you can unblock that, and at once, through different pairs of mediums, you break that control, that symbiosis, and bring each one of them to different pair of mediums to treat, to know everything about them, and to bring them to the present time and make them conscious and attached to the spirit they belong to. That's multiple unfoldment. And he said that Apometry, that is great for the spirit because it works well when it comes to spirit. It works with the personality, but one by one. And both treatment plus the treatment of each manifested personality, he says, form an effective therapeutic treatment or therapeutic system which can be used as an alternative medicine to resolve emotional matters, mental matters, physical matters, spiritual matters, and behavioral matters. And he said that, he stated that, J.S.Godinho, with experience, based on practice and years of experience. He has dedicated his life to that. And he says that with security. It's anyone can learn and help the others. As he said, you should learn in order to help. It doesn't matter where you use it. You can use it to help people of your church. You can use it to help people in your office as an alternative medicine, and as an alternative therapist, you can use it. If you are working with past life regression of memory, regression of extra brain memory, which means memories of other lifetimes, you can use those techniques. Now, along the way, through studies and practice, he established the 3 laws of personalities. And he also created and established other techniques, which was psychic capture and psychic alignment, that are great to be used in office. But in the office, psychic capture, one by one, you can use them in a perfect way. Psychic alignment, past life therapies, past life regression. You can do that very well, as he does, with experience. Multiple unfoldment, psychic capture, and psychic alignment was the result of the observation with details on the properties of the psyche and by observing the behavior of many types of psychic elements. What are the elements of a psyche? Spirit, multiple personality, and sub-personality. These elements that he calls psychic elements, these elements, they are different from each other, and they show on his books the difference between one and the other, when it is related to spirit, when it is related to multiple personality, when it is related to sub-personality. As he said, it was through many years observing with details the behavior of them. Now, he says that they have different needs, they have different complaints, they have different ups and downs, they have different attachment to the person, to the patient who is asking for help, and they have different, how would I say, different configuration. If they are personality, they have different names, they have different backgrounds, different languages, gender, it depends. Color and culture. If a spirits, you see they change according to the behavior and all the other things. And he said it was observed, that all the details were observed during many years with deep observation and details. He said that those techniques, apometry and multiple unfoldment, psychic capture and psychic alignment, are applicable to the treatment of people with the spiritual matters and people with psychic personality matters, which means also known as dissociative identity disorder. So it's the same, psychic personality matters and dissociative identity disorder in a holistic way without the use of any drugs. That's the way they do. That's the way they teach. That's the way we do, because we learned through them. And it is great when we speak about that with experience, and we see the results, and people come back to you and say, gosh, how I am different now, or how I feel released from this, from that matter, how I can feel myself in a different standing now. So as he said, and on his workshops and experience and conferences where he goes, he says the same thing and much better, because he's the one who created, he's the one with much more experience on the field. You need to be conscious of a lot of things in order to avoid losing yourself, because now it is very easy. You see a friend or a member of your family, and you notice something is not working well. Today, the person is one person, tomorrow suddenly is somebody else, acting like in different ways, 2 different ways, 3 different ways, it depends. And if you don't understand, you start interacting with them on the same vibration frequency, when they are not conscious of what's going on. Because when the matter comes with personality, multiple personality, it is too subtle. They get your brain and you start acting exactly the way they act, but not the way you yourself on your physical personality do normally. So Godinho also said and stated on his books, on the DVDs he made, he stated that the negative content from our unconscious mind and subconscious mind, which means multiple personalities from other lifetimes, unconscious, and from the subpersonality from the same life. So when the negative content of the unconscious mind and subconscious mind emerge into our consciousness, if not treated properly, it will affect us, it will sick us, it will disturb us, regardless the age, regardless the social status or the position you have in life, regardless your formation, educational formation, regardless of gender, of race, of anything. They come because each one of us has had many other lifetimes. You may not be willing to accept that because you are still under the way, under, I would say, what you would say, the conventional ways of the planet itself, or conventional ways of society, with all the positive ways for you to learn, because everything is in there, on your hands, most of them for free. There is no excuse to say, well, I don't have money, I don't have time. We make the time and money, the opportunity comes. Anyway, now let's continue with J.S.Godinho. Let's talk about his books. He wrote 8 books with the subject I'm showing each one of you for you, and 18 DVDs. The 18 DVDs comes with 36 hours of studies and treatment on the subject, spiritual matters and psychic matters and regression of memories and everything else. Because right now, currently, he goes around Brazil and outside to teach, to do conference, workshop, what else? Seminars. And he takes the opportunity on those times to teach, because he does courses. He takes the opportunity to discuss about what he does, about what he did, about his books, about his experiences, and so forth. This is Apometry with J.S.Godinho, an instrument for harmony and happiness. And what he talks about his book, Techniques of Apometry. He talks about the techniques and the 13 laws of Apometry, the new science of the soul, as he wrote here, the new science of the soul. And he talks about the 7 bodies and understanding the chakras and various forms of obsession, various forms of self-obsession, therapeutic treatment for them. That's what this book is all about. Now, let's see the other one. The second one is this one. It would be in English, The Portal of Happiness, Apometry in Practice. This is Apometry in Practice. This is his picture, and Apometry in Practice, a wonderful book. All of them are wonderful. This one is based on question and answer. And it is a kind of clarification of doubts on the technique of Apometry. He explains with the details.
Reincarnation. Could we come back as someone else? Here's Chris Cuomo with 2 down-to-earth parents who thought they understood the mysteries of life. That is, until their toddler began to talk.
Chris knows a lot about planes, especially war planes.
What kind of airplane is that?
It's a Corsair.
His parents, Andrea and Bruce Leininger, say from an early age, James would play with nothing else.
He was obsessed with airplanes. If you look around the house, that's all you'll see. Airplanes, helicopters, aircraft carriers.
But then, when he was 2, the planes James loved suddenly began to give him frequent and frightening nightmares.
I'd wake him up and he'd be screaming and he'd always be laying on his back, kicking his feet up at the ceiling. And I'd say, "Baby, what were you dreaming about?" And he'd say, "Airplane crash on fire, little man can't get out."
They sound like typical kiddie nightmares, but Andrea says they went on the same way for months. Maybe too much TV. But James was just 2, and his parents say only watching Barney and Teletubbies.
This is an F-18?
No, that one.
So what explains the nightmares and James's strange obsession with airplanes?
I talked to my mom about it a lot of times. My mom had said maybe he's remembering a past life.
What did you say?
Politely, baloney.
Andrea and Bruce of Lafayette, Louisiana are a highly educated, modern couple. To them, the possibility that their little son James was manifesting signs of a former life was, well, a little out there.
You know, having a past life is not the initial conclusion that you come to. You try and figure out any other way he could have. Did he see anything? Has there been anything on television, anything that we've discussed?
But as time went by, Andrea didn't know what to believe. Here's James at age 3, going over a plane as if he's doing a pre-flight check. He would continue to say and do things that were puzzling, like the time his mom bought him a toy airplane.
And I said, "Oh, look, there's a bomb on the bottom of it." He said, "That's not a bomb, Mama, that's a drop tank."
A drop tank?
I'd never heard of a drop tank. I didn't know what a drop tank was.
Andrea's mother suggested she look into the work of counselor and therapist Carol Bowman. Bowman has written 2 books, both supporting the proposition that sometimes the dead can be reborn.
We are taught from a very early age in this culture, in the Judeo-Christian culture, that reincarnation doesn't exist. Once you observe this in a child, and the evidence is very compelling, you have to open up to another explanation for what is going on.
Bruce was deeply skeptical.
He said there has to be a logical explanation.
I don't believe in past lives. I don't believe in this stuff.
But with the violent nightmares recurring 3 and 4 times a week, the Leinegers felt they had to do something. So with guidance from Bowman, they cautiously began to encourage James to share his memories. They say the result was startling.
The nightmares immediately started reducing in frequency. He went down from 3 or 4 times a week to maybe 1 a week, 1 every other week. And at that point was when he started to articulate more about these past life memories.
Seems normal enough, a little boy improving when his troubles are directly addressed. But Bowman says this is more, that James was forthcoming because this is the age when former lives are most easily recalled.
They haven't had the cultural conditioning, the layering over of experience in this life, so that the memories can percolate up more easily. These memories tend to fade between the ages of 5 to 7.
His parents say between the ages of 2 and 4, James would reveal extraordinary details about the life of a former fighter pilot, mostly at bedtime, when he was drowsy.
Bruce said, "What happened to your plane?" He said, "It crashed on fire." And Bruce said, "Why did your airplane crash?" And he said, "It got shot." And Bruce said, "Well, who shot your plane?" And I'll never forget the look on his face. He went, "Oh, the Japanese."
Still, despite these extraordinary stories, Bruce remained dubious. Almost to prove they couldn't be true, he began to piece together the details James was sharing. And what he found, he says, shook him to the core. For in many instances, the stories appeared to match the facts. James seemed to be recalling real events, real people, in the life of a man who'd been dead for almost 60 years. With each passing month, little James Leineger seemed to be peeling back memories of a past life.
Ooh, name.
Vivid memories that scared and astonished his parents.
Bruce had always said, "What kind of plane did you fly?" And he said, "A Corsair."
Yeah.
He said a Corsair?
He said the word Corsair.
Not only did James remember flying a Corsair, he demonstrated knowledge of the plane's peculiarities, like the time he was flipping through a book about planes when he was 4.
And he got to the Corsair and he said, "That's a Corsair." And he goes, "You know what? They used to get flat tires all the time.
In fact, historians and pilots agree that the plane's tires took a lot of punishment on landing. Of course, this is a fact that could easily be found in books or on TV. But then, James began to offer up the kinds of specific details his parents say are harder to explain away.
Another night, Bruce had come in and he said, "Do you remember where your plane took off?" And he said it took off of a boat. "Do you remember the name of your boat?" "Natoma." "Do you remember what your name was?" And he'd always say, "James." His name is James. It never really occurred to us. We thought he just wasn't understanding the question. So I said, "Do you remember any friends or anyone else that you flew with?" And he said, Jack Larson.
Bruce began doing some research. Almost immediately, he discovered that the Natoma was an actual ship, a small aircraft carrier in the Pacific called the Natoma Bay. And Jack Larson, the Navy buddy little James recalled? Well, it turns out there was a pilot named Jack Larson who served aboard the Natoma Bay. In fact, he's alive and well and living in Arkansas.
And it was like, holy mackerel. I mean, really, you could have poured my brains out of my ears. And I just couldn't believe it.
And there were more clues. Around this time, James began signing crayon drawings and other artwork, James 3.
One day I asked him why he's calling himself James 3. Well, it's because I'm the third James. And every once in a while you ask him that today, and he'll still say the same thing.
And one day, while leafing through a new book about the Battle of Iwo Jima, Bruce turned to an aerial photo of the Pacific Island. James was seated nearby.
He pointed to it and he goes, "Daddy, that's where my airplane was shot down." And I said, "What?" "That's my airplane got shot down there, Daddy." And I just went blank. I couldn't say anything.
By then, Bruce had become a man possessed, searching the internet, combing through military records, and interviewing men who served aboard the Natoma Bay. Finally, a breakthrough. He learned that there was just one pilot from the squadron killed at Iwo Jima. That pilot, James M. Houston Jr. Is this why little James was calling himself James 3?
It just crystallized in my mind. This has to be who we're talking about. You know, my meter of skepticism was starting to go over toward belief.
When little James would describe being shot down, he told of how his plane had sustained a direct hit on the engine.
We had an airplane, and I said, "Well, can you show me where it was?" And he pointed right up to the front of the engine.
That's what makes this man's story so intriguing. His name is Ralph Klarber. Klarber was a rear gunner on a TBM Avenger that flew off the Natoma Bay. On March 3rd, 1945, he took part in a raid near Iwo Jima. As it happens, Klarber's plane was right next to the one flown by James M. Houston Jr. It was to be Hugh's last mission before leaving for home the following day. As Klarber recalls, the sky was thick with enemy flak.
We experienced pretty heavy aircraft fire, but this was the most intense that I experienced at any time.
Suddenly, a flash near the nose of Houston's plane.
I saw the hit. I would say he was hit head on. Yeah, right on the middle of the engine.
Just as little James had described it.
So what do you believe now about your son James?
I believe that he had a past life. I believe that in his past life he was James M. Houston Jr. And he came back because he wasn't finished with something. And that's essentially what I believe.
Dear Bruce and Andrea.
And he's not the only one. This past October, the Leinegers received a letter from a woman named Ann Barron, the sister of pilot James Houston. Andrea and Bruce had contacted her about their little boy. Barron heard about what young James was saying, and she believes.
All of this is still overwhelming. I can only imagine how it has affected you, but I believe, with my love to you, Ann. The child was so convincing and coming up with all these things that there's no way in the world he could know, unless there is a spiritual thing.
I think that the parents are self-deceived, that they're fascinated by the mysterious, and they've built up a fairy tale.
Professor Paul Kurtz of the University of Buffalo heads an organization that investigates claims of the paranormal.
He's overhearing conversations of his parents. He's looking at cues. He may talk to his little friends or hear from neighbors. And then this conviction
that builds up that, yes, he was this pilot, and yes, he will come to believe that himself.
Do you ever rack your brain and say, gee, I hope I didn't say anything or do anything that put this in James' head? Do you ever question yourself still, or no?
No, because we're talking to a 2-year-old. You know, I mean, what am I going to do? Sit him in a corner and say, listen, now we're going to concoct this elaborate scheme, and you're going to imagine that you went through those things.
I knew what he watched on television. I knew what stories I read to him. I'm a protective, first-time Southern mother. There was no other place he could have been getting this information.
Assuming the liners are acting in good faith, what we have here is a classic conflict of faith versus science. Hard facts against beliefs that often can't be easily explained.